Well, we said he's going to dominate the 2 days.
You know what's interesting is, like, for these reporters, what an opportunity, right? That they have a commander-in-chief that's willing to take all their questions. That just is extremely unusual.
Remember the line from Axios yesterday that this administration is going to Davos not to make some presentation, but to go on stage, go on the world stage to talk about everything that they're dealing with right now. We interrupted Martha. Why don't we get back to her right now?
You know, just a big picture thought here. What is being unfolded here is a Western Hemisphere Trump strategy, okay? It's easy to get sort of caught up in Greenland and what he wants there, but he does want Greenland. But the reason is so that you can have a Space Force presence there that allows this dome to be built, that protects Canada and the United States. He scolded Mark Carney, the Prime Minister of Canada. He said, you know, you should appreciate what we're trying to do here for you. The other message is that part of the Western Hemisphere is Europe. And he said to Europe at the very top of this speech, government spending and increased immigration are not the answers. And he just said it again there, which tells you this is a very big point that they want to make. You have to have safe borders. You have to secure the boundaries and the greatness of Europe and what it once was. You have to recognize, he said, parts of the world are being destroyed before our eyes, and the leaders of those countries don't even realize it. I think this is the clarion call that President Trump is trying to present to the Western Hemisphere, to Europe, to the United States, to Canada. Get your act together. Economically, he said, a lot of you, if you did what we're doing, your countries could have more success too. That is the big message. We heard it from Lutnick. We heard it from Bassett. They want these countries to stand up and take notice because they want them to be strong economically as well and not to waste their money on, you know, loose border immigration and energy programs that end up, you know, windmills like Don Quixote being, you know, just sort of dreams that never come to fruition.
Well, they're still buying oil from Russia 4 years after that
also
war
a problem.
Martha, thank you. Rebecca Heinrichs now, your thought about what we're hearing right now out of Davos to you. Good morning.
Good morning. Well, I would just pile on kind of what Martha was saying there. President Trump goes back and forth between talking about how he wants Europe to be strong and then criticizing, of course, the Europeans for not spending enough on NATO, talking about making that he has led NATO to get stronger, and then criticizing the fact that Americans don't get much out of NATO. And if I can pull those things together in a way I think for our viewers that makes a lot of sense, which is that NATO is great for the United States when it's strong, because Europe is still our largest trading partner. I think last year it was something like Europe had, you know, $1.6 trillion of American imports, and they invested half of foreign direct investments, which means American jobs and prosperity here at home. So President Trump is urging Europeans to stop. You know, he criticized Germany under Merkel for getting rid of nuclear energy and praised the current German Chancellor Merz for moving away from that again. And then, of course, on Greenland, I really appreciated President Trump disabusing anybody of this notion that the United States would even consider military force against this great ally of the United States. And he moved the conversation back into the category of the United States needing to strengthen the security of Greenland for NATO. It's good for the United States and Americans. And we have a treaty that already allows us to expand our forces there. And the Danes are willing to collaborate. So my hope, based on the president's remarks today, is that we're moving back into more productive negotiations within the context of the NATO alliance.
Thank you, Rebecca. And Edward Lawrence, you were listening as well. You were there. You weren't in the room, but you were listening. And there was a lot on the economic front. President Trump touched a bit on domestic policy issues like housing and credit cards. What are the headlines that you took away?
Yeah, really interesting. I'm actually standing on top of the building that the president is in right now and where he made that speech. About the only thing he didn't talk about was the national game, the national championship game that he had went to. But, you know, it was very interesting on the economy. At one point on Greenland, I was told from the Treasury Secretary this morning here in Davos that is the reason they put the tariffs on. It's because those 8 countries sent troops to Greenland and they don't know what they wanted with that. What was the result of it? What was the message they were sending to the United States by sending those troops? And that's one of the reasons that happened. You know, the Secretary, or I should say Ambassador Greer, the U.S. Trade Representative, tells me that they are in negotiations, and the president has started those negotiations for Greenland on the leader-to-leader level. Now, when it comes to the economy, it was very interesting. The president said a number of times that national security is economic security and the other way around. Economic security is national security. He went through a number of the successes that he has had here. He did talk about housing. Leading up to this, we were told this speech was going to be an unveil of all the housing initiatives he wanted to do. He talked about things that he's already done, and one included in there was the credit cards. He wants to cap credit cards at 10%. Now, the president is saying that when you charge those exorbitant fees, that puts pressure on the bottom line of American families so they can't afford those down payments. He wants to use part 401k money for some of those down payments in there. So the housing issue is really a big one we were looking for here. We got a snippet of it. It was eclipsed, as you guys have been talking about the global events that have been happening here in Davos and the president making those statements. So, yeah, very interesting what he talked about, touting the economy, reminding folks the America is the place to be, the place to invest. And there were the CEOs of the who's who of CEOs were in the room here. He was talking directly to them at several points about how they can invest, will invest, should invest in the United States and making it a great thing. You know, one more point on the economy there. The Citadel CEO, a big hedge fund money market, he actually said in one of the panels today that the Biden administration had their plans, their economic plans were not well thought out. And he made the point that because of that, he did tremendous damage to the U.S. economy. Back to you guys.
Yeah, that was significant, and certainly to hit the markets as well with those comments. But we are far beyond Biden, especially just like if you think about an hour and 10-minute speech, 18 minutes more with questions from on stage. Then he goes to the reporters. He takes more questions on that, and so making headlines all across the board.
Yeah, might be doing it again right now. Let's put a fine point on the foreign policy agenda here. Roll soundbite number 2. This is what is the headline as of now, here and in Europe.
People thought I would use force. I don't have to use force. I don't want to use force. I won't use force. All we're asking for is to get Greenland, including right title and ownership, because you need the ownership to defend it. You can't defend it on a lease. Number one, legally it's not defensible that way.
Okay, so that's really what Rebecca was referring to about, you know, the hard position and the soft position, and probably makes a lot of Europeans. I mean, their headlines were obvious. We read them. A lot of people, if you've listened to the president over the past 10 years, you really have to parse the nuance. And frankly, I don't think European leaders are doing that. Even to this point, they're not parsing the nuance. Now, we were told at the very beginning of the speech, he called the American economy, Martha, an economic miracle. Once he gets done with Switzerland, next week he's going to Iowa. And you come right back to this domestic agenda, thinking about the midterms in November, Martha.
Yeah, just on your first point, Bill, very quickly, I think you're so right. Why don't these European leaders have a learning curve for understanding Trump language? Because did anyone really think that the United States was about to put troops on the ground in Greenland? Well, I think most people who have observed the president see that as his opening salvo in terms of this negotiation. But no, the European leaders start, sending military forces there to protect Greenland, which makes them look like exactly right. They do not understand Trump speak. They don't know how this works, which is shocking, actually, after all
I would
these
say
years.
with the exception of Mark Rutte.
Yes, I would agree with you.
It seems like they have a relationship.
I would agree with you. He seems to get it. With regard to Iowa, I think that's true. And I think that's why they had this domestic focus that they had planned to really make the center of this because of the timing and then the trip to Iowa right after this. He understands, the president understands, obviously, he's got to make housing cheaper. He's got to deal with those sorts of things that Edward Lawrence was just talking about, a number of measures. And plus, the drop in energy is something they're going to continue to emphasize because that does make everything else in your life a little bit more financially handleable when you go to the gas pump to fill up and it's getting cheaper. So it all ties together.
Great. What a great panel. Thank you so much for being with us and listening to the speech. A big day.
Thank you,
Rebecca
Martha.
and Edward, thank you so much.
Hey everyone, I'm Emily Campagno. Catch me and my co-hosts Harris Faulkner and Kaylee McEnany on Outnumbered every weekday at 12 p.m. Eastern, or set your DVR. Also, don't forget to subscribe to the Fox News YouTube page for daily highlights.